Susan Lewis and her daughter Jamie moved into a new home in Southern California, and shortly after moving in, Susan's new boyfriend Matt, he moved in as well. Also, Matt had a daughter named Marie who was the same age as Jamie, and so those two got along great. Susan and Matt are getting along great. Everything would change when the peanut butter spilled. A few weeks after moving in, Matt and Jamie and Marie are all outside goofing around in the pool. Susan goes into the kitchen and she sees on the counter that a peanut butter jar had its lid off and had been turned on its side. And oddly enough, the peanut butter seemed to be running out of the jar like it had been melted. And so she reflexively turns around. She's like, Jamie, her daughter, Jamie, get in here. Jamie comes inside and she's like, what, Mom? And she's like, did you do this? And Jamie would say that she literally laughed at her mom. Like, why would I do that? She calls in Marie, and Marie too is like, no, I didn't touch the peanut butter. And they come back in the house later that day. They find that there have been cans, like canned food, stacked on each of the steps leading upstairs. They also find that there have been random objects placed all over the house in strange pattern. In the bathroom, they find shampoo bottles stacked on top of one another, hairbrushes arranged in a star pattern on the counter. They open the microwave and find peanut butter jars and other random canned foods and stuffed animals from the kids' rooms in the microwave. There was shampoo on the walls and soap on the walls. And so when Susan and Matt and the girls go inside, they think that someone's invaded their house. So they run back out again and no one's come near their property. So they start filming it. Matt believes it's Jamie, so not his biological daughter. Susan believes it's his daughter, Marie, and it starts this awful conflict between Matt and Susan. So a week passes and Jamie and Marie are spending some time together in Jamie's room. Marie was sitting at a desk that was next to the bed, and Jamie had a cup of coffee. She puts the cup of coffee down on the desk next to Marie and says, I have to go use the bathroom. She turns around, she walks out, she comes back, and Marie has her head down in her homework. And Jamie walks in and sees that the cup of coffee has now been thrown all over her bed. She's like, Marie, what are you doing? Why'd you throw my coffee all over the bed? And Marie pokes her head up and she's like, what are you talking about? And she looks over at the coffee and she's just as surprised as Jamie is. Jamie leaves the room, comes back, and she puts the bleach down on her dresser. And so she goes over to the bed, picks up the cup itself that had the coffee, she puts that back on the table, turns around to get the bleach, and the cap has been turned off and it's now dumping bleach all over her clothes. It's just pouring out. Marie had been sitting in the chair the whole time, and Jamie had seen her the whole time. And so when she sees the bleach dumping all over her clothes, she knows it could not have been Marie. So she screams. Marie looks over. She sees what's going on. She screams. Susan hears this and comes charging in the room and she's like, what's going on? The girls can't describe what's going on. And as they're standing there, a picture frame falls off the wall and it startles them all. They're looking over and then another picture falls and they run out of there. They get in the car and actually just leave the house. When they get back to the house is once again covered in cans all up the stairs, placed in weird orientations on the ground, things in the microwave, all the food's been dumped out, there's liquids all over the wall, and they hadn't been there, and neither had Matt. When Matt came home that night, he was just more convinced that it had to have been Marie or Jamie, or even Susan. It causes a huge fight between him and Susan. He's like, why are you letting the kids doing this? Why are you feeding into this? She's saying, you don't get it. There's something wrong with this house. That night, all the power went out in the house, and all they heard all night was doors banging nonstop. And their stove is set to light, so all you hear is that clicking sound. They couldn't get it to turn off. So the next day, Susan would actually go to her close friend and say, here's what's going on, and I have no idea what to do. And her friend would say, maybe you ought to try giving it a peace offering. She had this little figurine. It was a cat figurine. Susan loved cats, and she figured that a cat represented something she loved, and so it would be the perfect kind of deliberate, intentional offering. And she puts candles on this table, and she puts the cat right in the middle, and the girls are just sitting there like, what's happening here? And Susan just kind of says, please accept this gift. It's my gift to you. We mean no harm and we want to coexist. As they're performing this kind of ritual, Matt came home and he immediately goes to like, absolutely not. We're not going to go to trying to interact with this thing. We're not going to act like it's real. It's not real. And so he goes over and he kind of picks up on what they're doing. And, Susan and the girls are telling him, don't do anything, don't touch it. And he takes the figurine and he walks out to the back deck and he throws it onto their backyard. And Susan and the girls are crying because they're like, oh my gosh, you're gonna make this so much worse. Everybody's attention is towards the backyard. When they all turn around to look at the mantle, Matt thinking he had solved the problem, there is a figurine, an identical one of the cat that's sitting on the table again. They all gasp, they can't believe it, and it doesn't make any sense. They watched Matt throw the figurine. Matt doesn't care, picks it up and throws it on the ground and smashes it right then and there. Susan would say that she knew they were going to go through hell for that. That night, after everybody finally fell asleep, Jamie wakes up in the middle of the night and goes down into the kitchen to get a snack. When she goes in there, she sees written all over the walls, everywhere, is the word cat. Everywhere. And she immediately runs upstairs. She gets her mom, she gets Matt and Marie. Everybody sees that there's this word cat written everywhere. Matt looks at Jamie and says, "You're the one that found this. You did this." Susan comes to defend Jamie and says, "You're the one, Matt, that smashed the cat figurine. There's no wonder this is happening." And so this horrible fight happens. Meanwhile, they're blatantly being haunted. And as they move some things aside in the kitchen, they find what looks to be a huge footprint. It is not Matt's footprint. It's certainly not one of the girls' footprints. Susan desperately wanted to leave the house, but she couldn't do it financially. So in the last couple of weeks that they ever stayed at this house, because they would leave, two major events occurred. The first one happened when Marie was home alone, and it's nighttime. She's sitting in the living room watching TV, and at some point the TV starts turning off and on. So off on, off on, off on, and she knows, because she's been in this house now and seen the craziness, that something bad's about to happen. And the TV finally just turns off. She reaches for the remote flies off the table. She watches as the rocking chair right in front of her just starts to rock back and forth. Marie is looking at the rocking chair as all the pictures on the walls just start one by one falling off the wall. She takes her camera in her hand and kind of turns it and just starts taking pictures of the room before running out of the room to get her phone, where she calls Susan, she calls her dad, she calls everybody. She's screaming into the phone, "You gotta get here, something's going on." And Susan flies home, Jamie flies home, they rush inside and they grab her, and she's unhurt, but the house has once again been tossed. Marie says, "I took pictures. There are these weird orbs of light that are very clearly in the room with her, that are moving around the room. She managed to get a couple pictures of them, and they're just totally out of this world." At this point, Matt is convinced that there's something paranormal happening in the house, and so Matt decides, well, I don't know who we call for this, but I think you call the church. And the best he could do was get a pastor to come over and pray with them before leaving and saying, "We can't help you." And finally, the second major event that occurred in those final 2 weeks happened to Jamie. When she was home alone. Jamie was in her room and she starts hearing pounding on her door. She started filming this pounding on her door. And at some point she knows she has to go into the hall. And so she goes over to the door, and as soon as her hand would go near the doorknob, the pounding on the other side of the door would stop. And so she didn't open the door, and she went back onto her bed and she just sat there in the fetal position for 3 hours, listening to something smashing nonstop into the door. At some point, the banging stops. And after a few minutes of the banging being done, she thinks this is her chance to escape the house. She opens the door, and there's no one there. On the ground in the hall is a pile of utensils. This thing had been using tools to try to open the door. Next door to her room was a bathroom. There was a space for a doorknob that you could actually look through. And she noticed in the bathroom that the light was flickering. And she thought, I think it's in there. And she decides she's going to try to trap this thing. So she goes to her desk where she had some string. She goes back over and loops the string through this hole in the door and leans back and pulls the door shut, thinking she's trapped this thing inside. As soon as she does, she starts feeling resistance on the door. Someone is pulling back. And at some point, the string gets cut and she falls back into her room. At which point, the bathroom door swings open and she says, "I'm about to come face to face with something out of my nightmares." But before she could see this thing come out of the bathroom, her bedroom door slams shut, and she hears the rustling of pans and tools and metal clinking against each other right outside her door. She knows this thing is interacting with all those tools and pots and pans right on the other side of her door. It's this horrifying thought. And after just a moment or two, she sees smoke coming into her bedroom. And so she immediately runs to the door to try to open it. And when she does, she sees that now there is a frying pan sitting in the hall that has a toilet paper roll completely on fire. And that there's been toilet paper strewn all over the hallway. Like this is a wick and it's going to light the hallway on fire. She grabs a sweatshirt and she smothers the fire. At this point, she's in full survival mode. She knows she has to get out of this house. It's trying to kill her. She goes into the living room. The whole thing has been covered in toilet paper, paper towels. Papers have been strewn everywhere. This thing was trying to light the house on fire with her trapped inside. And so she manages to make her way through this maze of toilet paper. She sees there's no other fire set, and she goes outside defeated and just sits on the front steps of her house, waiting for her mom to come back. Susan, Matt, and Marie were all together, so they came back and they saw Jamie sitting on the front steps just crying. They go inside, they see the scene. Jamie explains what happens, and that was it. They knew they were going to have to go bankrupt to leave the house. And so they barely packed up and they left that house. It didn't sell. Susan literally went bankrupt. And soon after they left the neighborhood, their neighbors left the neighborhood, and 5 other neighbors in their immediate vicinity all left. All of the houses did not sell. They are all vacant. No one knows why. Susan, Jamie, Matt, and Marie, since leaving that neighborhood, even though they were ruined financially, they were very happy to get out of there. They've had no other paranormal activity since they left, and they're just glad they got out of there with their lives.